Are you ready?
Oh, yeah!
From parts unknown and into your home, this is the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. Now, here's your host, Groovy G.
Hello there, folks, and welcome to the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. On this episode, we sit down with the brother of the belts himself, Mr. Josh Hammer. He's coming your way right now.
You're watching the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. For your official Groovy G Belt Podcast merchandise, check out www.groovyGshop.com.
Josh Hammer, welcome to the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks, Groovy. Good to talk to you for the first time.
Yeah, good to talk to you as well, too, because we've known each other for a while, haven't we?
Many years. Back in the old days. The old belt groups.
Very much so. Now, before we start, and I'm going to spring this on you, because we are old friends, I have to ask you about your health. You've had some health issues recently. I just want to get an update. How are things going? How are you? How are things?
I feel great. I'm in good spirits. I'm very blessed. Right now I'm in the process of trying to get a kidney transplant. When I got so sick there a couple of years ago, they had to give me so many high-powered antibiotics because I went septic. The antibiotics, they saved my life, but they fried my kidneys, unfortunately. So working on that. But other than that, I'm very happy. I'm very blessed. Thank you for asking, by the way.
Oh, that's okay, mate. I always like to check in on belt collecting friends and friends in general as well, too. All right, let's get back to the belts here. What was it for you? Was it wrestling or was it the belts? What hooked you first of all?
I can remember the first time I seen belts. I was watching wrestling first, but I can remember immediately falling in love with belts. I know, like, the first belt I ever, everybody tells the story of making their backyard wrestling belts. I made the Backlund belt. Although I don't remember ever being a fan of Bob Backlund, I do remember making that belt. And then it was probably the Hogan 86. I was a WWF guy. I like the big gold and all that, but I grew up on WWF. So those are my earliest memories. Hogan 86, the classic tags, the classic Intercontinental. I started around WrestleMania 3. That was my introductory to belts, and I've been hooked ever since.
And I guess that is the golden age of professional wrestling belts, because you've got Reggie Parks at his peak doing belts for both the NWA, which became WCW, the AWA, and also the WWF as well too.
Right, yeah, and like I said, I was, because WWF was what was on TV here. We got a little bit of NWA with TBS, but mainly it was WWF. I fell in love with their belts first, and I love all those old Reggie Park designs from NWA, but definitely WWF first and foremost.
You talked about you made your own sort of belt in the backyard. That's where
the
way most belt collectors will come into it. How did you move on to getting into finding out how these real belts were made? Because you were one of these first guys that actually talked to people like Dave Milliken and Reggie Parks and got real belts made. How did that all come about? Tell me this. I'm assuming this is pre-internet days, or maybe it's just the start of the internet. How did it all happen?
Start of the internet. I was introduced to it. I was looking at stuff on eBay, and I think it was Elgin Moore is who turned me on to the belt groups, the Yahoo groups, and then there was Flame Fans, which eventually it didn't become, but Belt Talk come of that, or Belt Marks and Belt Talk, Flair for the Gold. It was a very friend of a friend hobby. You really had to know somebody to even know how to get in contact with Midwest. I know belts have exploded in price, but even back then, it wasn't a cheap hobby. There was stuff you could order from Reggie. You could get a Winged Eagle for $800, but you were still waiting a few months. And I can remember my very first belt was a Reggie Parks Winged Eagle, and I still paid over $1,800 for it. So it's always been a pricey hobby. But, you look at a Reggie Parks Winged Eagle now, and you're looking at about $5,000 American. It's exploded. But Reggie Parks isn't making very many more belts anymore. But it was, like I said, it was a very, you really had to know somebody to get into it. And Elgin Moore's who introduced me, and I like to think that I introduced a few other guys to it. I don't think it's ever been bigger now. It's just exploded the last few years. And I think that's a part of Facebook. Facebook really just made the hobby a lot bigger.
Absolutely. We will get to Facebook, and we'll get to Brothers of the Belt as well too, because you're certainly a pioneer on the Facebook circuit. Let's go back to those days when you had to get introduced to somebody that maybe have known a belt. What were the forums like? Were there wrestling fans talking about wrestling, and then it was a subsection of people talking about belts? Or were they belt-specific areas within certain groups? Or how did it all work?
It was dominated by belts. A lot of those old groups, there were different categories. Like, it would all be, say, for instance, slam fans. But then there would be subcategories like wrestling talk, replica belt talk, quote, real belt talk, belts for sale. And the wrestling talk was really took a back seat. It was dominated by belts. And it was just crazy because, for years I thought I was the only person that had this crazy obsession for championship belts. Like, I always would collect the wrestling magazines, but like, if it was a wrestling magazine with a good cover photo showing a good picture of a wrestling belt, I would buy 2 copies of it. One to keep in a folder because it was a good belt picture, and then another one that I would just go, I would read, but I wouldn't really be concerned about tearing the pages up. But yeah, it was dominated by belts.
Okay, do you remember the names of these groups, or what were the things? I'm just trying to get a bit of history here, that's all.
Yeah, I don't really remember the Yahoo group names. I think the first group I was in was Slam Fans, or maybe it was either Slam Fans, I think it was maybe Belt Marks. And I cannot recall the gentleman's name that owned it. But then he turned it into Slam Fans, and then Dan McMahon created Belt Talk, and that was really what dominated it for years. And then Player for the Gold kind of broke off his net, and that was a guy named Fabian, I think his screen. That's the difference now. Everybody back then had screen names. So, I mean, that's how I knew you as Groovy G. We all had screen names. I was OLW2K, and I kind of miss that, to be honest with you, because Facebook, although it's great, you really give out a lot of personal information to some people you really don't want given personal information to. So that's kind of a drawback to the Facebook groups.
And that's what I was going to ask you as well too. In those early days when you had a screen name, you had your own avatar, whatever, you had your own personality online because it was all secretive. Right. There was also an element of secrecy, and I guess what the wrestling business is about as well too. A little bit of outsiders aren't allowed in, so we're not going to talk about how belts are made. Can you remember? Right. Can you remember a time when you asked about how a belt was made, or thinking about how did they get those things? Are they real solid pieces of gold? Can you remember a time like that when you thought about asking those questions, or when you asked those questions?
I think, especially early on, I immediately recognized that it was a kept secret, that they didn't just tell to anybody. But then and I did a lot of just sitting back and watching, and I made a lot of good friendships, a lot of really good friendships that over 20 years later, I still have. And really, once people got to know you, they would open up. I know, especially like with leather work, it is very secretive. More people share now, but making belts isn't easy. That's one thing I did realize over the years. I never tried to make belts, but I did try to do leather work. And not just anybody could do it. And I've always respected that it is artwork, and I don't have a problem with people protecting their craft, because, obviously we've seen people have infiltrated it and kind of just really cheapened the hobby.
Absolutely.
And that's unfortunate.
That's what I was going to ask as well too, because I was around a little bit, you were around before me, but I was around long enough to know that you couldn't ask for photos. Things like you couldn't say, hey, Has anyone got a photo of a winged eagle they want to share? Has anyone got a photo of a up-close intercontinental title they want to share? No one wanted to share photos. And things like bootlegs, people talked, yeah, bootlegs existed,
Right.
but you never knew where they came from or what exactly they were, because no one knew how belts were made.
Yeah, I think now Elgin, he really hurt his reputation. And Elgin was a good friend of mine, but nothing negative to say about him. But he did have some bad deals, and he kind of got himself blackballed. But he was really who introduced me to the hobby. And he was trusted at the time. So because he introduced me, he kind of gave me the seal of approval to everyone else. So other people kind of opened up to me behind the scenes, in private chats, and would share pictures with me. And that's actually how I got my first boot, which still, boots back then were not cheap. My first boot that I bought in 2007, it was a Midwest boot. And I've had it since 2007. And here's the difference in it now than what it was then. The gentleman who sold me this belt, I've never once said what it was. He asked me, if I sell this to you, you're never to share pictures of it. You're never to tell, that where you got it from. And there was an honor between us. And, that's been, 16 years now. I've never shared pictures of the photos of that belt with anybody. I've never told anybody what it is. And I still have that belt because that was the code, and it was respected back then. And you don't see much of that anymore. And that's unfortunate.
And that's an interesting point as well too, because it was that code. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Is it because wrestling's such a secretive hobby in the first place anyway, because you know that it's all a show, and the wrestling belts as well too? Do people want to keep kayfabe to try and be like the wrestlers, or is it because
I think
so
that
hard?
is a big part, Groovy. I really do. I think that is because we're all wrestling fans, and most of us are traditional wrestling fans that really respect what it is. And part of that is it's kind of like the carnival. The carnies don't tell their secrets. So I think us older guys really respect that, and we want to stay true to it.
That combined with, for me anyway, that old school respect combined with the price that we were talking about, that really cements sort of somebody being a part of a group, because you've paid a lot of money for something, and also you've sort of been given a nod of approval, or someone's given you some sort of respect.
When I got my first belt, it was a Reggie Parks Winged Eagle. I paid $1,800 for it, and that was, I don't even know how long ago that was, but that was a long time ago. Like I said, that belt now sells for about $5,000 American. I bought it from a gentleman named Highway John. Great guy. Unfortunately, I don't even know what his name is anymore to talk to him on Facebook. But when I got that, I felt like I was a part of an exclusive club. And I really respected that sense of belonging that I don't really feel exists anymore in the hobby.
Going back to that time in your own mind, once you got that Winged Eagle, what was your opinion on bootlegs then?
I was definitely interested in them, but I respected what, I guess, because back then, I know Dave Milliken probably doesn't remember, but I've had lunch with Dave Milliken before. I've talked to Reggie Parks on the phone before. Dave McMahon, I've hung out with those guys. So there was common respect, because we considered all these guys friends. And now it's kind of gotten away from it. It's gotten so big. So yeah, the boots were definitely, I guess, because we considered Reggie and Dave and these guys personal friends, we don't want to hurt them. Within just years of wait times going up, and ultimately, I fell in love with the belts, not necessarily the makers of the belts. So that's why I own bootlegs now. Honestly, I can't afford $5,000 and waiting 5 to 10 years on these. It's changed. It's definitely not what it was 20 years ago.
Let's go back to, you could get a belt from Dave Milliken or Reggie Parks from talking to somebody on one of these pages. How did it go about them finally? What, did they give you their name, or did you have to pay them cash and they got it through Milliken? How did it all work, you getting a real belt off one of these real guys?
I know with Highway John, I believe I mailed him a money order. So that's, money order, somebody can really screw you on that. But I think I was probably in the groups for about 2 years, so I really got to know the guy. And the one thing about this hobby with those old belt groups was your name was everything. And once you screwed one person, you're done. You might make money today by screwing one person, but you're not going to make any more money tomorrow because your name's trash. So I knew I could trust Highway John. And then my second belt was from Rusty Miller. And he lived fairly close to me. But again, I had got to know him over 2 or 3 years' time. And I sent him Western Union too, I believe. And there was just a lot of trust. You got to know these guys, you got to know their reputation. But I would say, because honestly, you're getting to know them with screen names. So we would start sharing phone numbers, and we would start talking on the phone. And I don't know that I ever talked to someone on the phone the first time, but we didn't talk, a solid 2 hours, because you're finally talking to a real voice of someone who has the same passion that you do, that for years you thought you were the only person that loved this.
What sort of years are we talking about here? What's the timeline? Are we talking late 90s, early 2000s? Is this before the replicas came out from Figs and stuff?
Yeah, it was towards the end. I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name. I think when I started, I can remember Google. That Google or Yahoo is probably how I first started finding belt pictures. And I can remember first what it was is I was searching wrestling belts, and these pictures come up, and it was like custom logos, and I'm like, well, that's a winged eagle, but that's not a WWF logo. So that's when I started discovering that collectors were able to buy these things. They couldn't get the WWF logo because it was copyrighted, but they could get like the FWF or the WWE logo. And then I can remember finding Dave Miller, Super Dave, and I was so jealous because this guy, he had all of these belts that I just loved, and I was like, that's what I want. And then when I found these belt groups, Dave Miller was on there, and to me, he was like a celebrity. And I'll never forget, in 2007, in Charlotte, North Carolina, I went to NWA Legends Fest, and it's this thing where all these old legend pro wrestlers meet. But Dave Milliken goes there and sets up a booth, and a lot of the guys from the belt groups would meet there. So I drove down there. It was about 5.5 hours from where I live here in Huntington, West Virginia. And I drove down there, and there was a lot of pro wrestlers there, but I was more starstruck over, meeting Dan McMahon, Russ Miller, all these guys. I mean, I was just blown away because these were the guys I had been looking at all these pictures of with these belts that I loved for years. And we all just clicked. And it's like, I can remember sitting in a bar, and Gold Dust, Dustin Reynolds, is sitting over there smoking a cigar. But I'm more interested in meeting Dan McMahon and Russ Miller than meeting these wrestlers. And it was just really cool. And same with Dave Milliken. I remember meeting Dave Milliken. It's just like, wow, this is Dave Milliken.
Well, you talk about photos of Super Dave that you see with all of his belts. He's got photos on Dave Milliken's website. You too also have photos on Dave Milliken's website.
Yes.
How did that come about? Did he ask you once the belts were delivered, shoot us a photo? How did that all work?
Yeah, there was a guy named Javi, and I hope I'm saying his name correctly. Really nice guy. Javi, I'm not sure it's Javi Cortez, but he is who created the Dave Milliken website, and he was in the belt groups. And Dave Milliken was in the belt groups, but he didn't really post. He was kind of behind the scenes. But back then, you could contact Dave Milliken. Now it's just exploded. He can't really talk to people. I mean, I know he still communicates with some people, but Hobby really overseen the website, and Hobby's who took care of all that, and that's who put my picture on his website. But when you would get the belt from him, usually right before you would get it, they would they would post a bunch of pictures after they completed it, and they would kind of give a shout out who it was for, unless you didn't want people to know. Because, that's the thing about this hobby. There are a lot of collectors that do not want people to know who they are. Because I know a lot of times whenever I would post belts, people would just fill up your inbox, hey, is that for sale? It's like, no, if I wanted to sell it, I would post, hey, this is for sale. So a lot of people, they like their collections, and they're not interested in sharing it with people. They're just very secretive about it. And I respect that.
So Dave Milliken would make a belt for you. Was there any sort of, could you talk him into or persuade him to make a WWF logo, or did you have to pay a fee to get the proper logos?
No, Dave is pretty straight-laced. There was a logo fee, and that was a requirement. Some people had that deal with him. I don't know, but I never did. And I never even asked him. I was afraid to be honest with you. That was the thing. You only had a select few groups. I mean, now with the Facebook groups, there are hundreds of them probably, at least dozens and dozens. So if you upset the wrong people, well, you can just go to another group. But back then, you had to walk a fine line. If you upset the wrong people and you were shunned, you were just blackballed. You couldn't buy any belts. I mean, you were just out of luck. So you definitely had to respect the hobby. There really wasn't any other choice.
And what sort of stuff would get you blackballed then? Like a lot of times, I don't know if it's a new thing now, or if it's a Facebook thing, or it's just a generational thing. You can be a very big, tough guy behind a screen and a keyboard. Was it a lot of, when people showed these real belts, was it a lot of people just saying, yeah, that's a really good belt, even though the leather sucked, or was it honest feedback, or was it people just trying to be nice, or what was the general feel in the hobby then?
The majority were always very nice, but there was always that one troll who says, yeah, I like it, but I would have done it this way. And I've never acted that way because I knew how important my belts are to me and how excited I am to get them. And you really didn't start seeing the criticism until the replica belts started coming out. And the replica belts really kind of cheapened the hobby a little bit. And I think people, because with the, quote, real belts, you didn't have to have a lot of money to own a real belt. Some people had more money than others, obviously, and you would just have to save. And that's what I did again. I don't have a lot of money. I had kids to provide for. So I had to save my money to buy that belt. So when you see someone just popping up, buying a $200 replica, like, hey, that's nice. But, I paid $1,800 for this Reggie Park Winged Eagle. It's not the same thing. So I think that's kind of where arguments kind of started. But I've never wanted to insult anybody because they didn't have the money to afford it. But I think if you want something bad enough, you can work for it and get it. Because that's what I did. That's how I got mine.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And I guess that's where it's a little bit, I guess it's maybe it might be an old school thing of being protective about the hobby. When people first come into the hobby and they start asking about belts and how they're made and things like that, it was very secretive for a long time. And now when people start asking that straight away and you might get a smart-ass comment, I could understand why that is. But you're saying there was drama even from the start? There was people always wanting to...
From the very beginning, there's been drama in this hobby.
Why do you think that is?
I cannot imagine have this kind of drama, but it's always been this way.
Why? Why is that?
For one, I think because it's almost like the circus. Like I said a while ago, it's very protected. And I think exactly the reason is from the very beginning, people have tried to capitalize and make money from it, and people don't respond well to that. So when somebody pops up saying, how do I do leather work? Well, this is how this guy is making money. No one just told him about it. He's had to get it in. It's taken him years to learn how to do it. So obviously they're going to protect it. They're just not going to give that knowledge to anybody. Because, again, you look at Dave Milliken, it's just how he pays his bills. Reggie Parks, that's how he pays his bills. So I think that's why it's so protected. Like I said, from the very beginning, people have tried to make money off of it. So that kind of sours people the wrong way.
The replicas came out probably the late 90s,
Yep.
like the Figs ones. So you were into that before the replicas came out?
Yeah.
What was your feeling when you opened up the wrestling magazine and saw all these belts from Figures Inc., all the replicas in the back page?
Blown away because, obviously the pictures look better than what they really were. And I knew when I got the first one, I believe it was a WCW US, or it might have been that big gold, the thin plate big gold. And I immediately knew something wasn't right when I looked at the back and I could see the screws, and I'm like, well, that's not what it's like on TV. So I immediately knew it wasn't the same quality. But I think at one point I owned like 27 replicas. It was very addictive. But they were affordable, they were like $250 at the time.
And that's what you said before, because even in the days when you could talk directly to Reggie Parks or Dave Milliken, it was still an expensive hobby.
Yeah, always has been.
So where were the bootlegs coming from? They weren't coming from Pakistan. Were they American or what?
Yeah, it was American. Some of the bootlegs, without getting into the names, they were known makers of custom American belts. But then if you got to know them pretty well, they were doing bootleg belts for, but it was known once they accepted you into it, and really, somebody had to vouch for you that you were trusted, because if you went out one time and showed it, then again, you were blackballed and you wouldn't be able to get anything else.
If someone like Milliken or Reggie Parks was still making belts then, the WWF logo was $1,000. What
Right.
were, and they would still make it if you paid that money, what were the bootleg belts getting made at that time? What were the top ones getting made? Were they the NWA belts? Were they the WWF belts? What were the top belts getting bootlegged at that time?
My first one was a Midwest design. And I can remember feeling guilty because it was Midwest, because most people, even back then, it was somewhat acceptable to bootleg Jamar belts. Because even back then, he was known for not having the best customer service skills and taking such a long time to get it. So it was somewhat acceptable to bootleg his designs. But Midwest was still getting belts out to people in 6 months to a year. They were still somewhat reasonably affordable. And I can remember buying a Midwest boot and feeling a little bit guilty about it. And I think that's why, other than the deal I made with the person that sold it to me, not to show it to anyone, but part of it was, too, was out of respect to Midwest. So, and then, over the years when the prices kept going up, and then you start hearing about all these, just ridiculous wait times for whatever reason, it became pretty much acceptable to bootleg Midwest as well.
Do you remember what belt it was that was the first bootleg you got, the Midwest one? What was it?
It was the Hogan 84, American made. And I believe without disclosing, I believe the actual maker of it has since passed away.
Was it
But it was very well done. Very well clean. The size was off a little bit, but it was a very well done belt. Good leather, really nice belt.
Was it as good as a Midwest belt?
I won't say it was as good. Dave Milliken leather is just excellent. Dave Milliken is a perfectionist. Reggie Parks is Reggie Parks. He's the king of belts. But Milliken, it's hard for anybody to touch Milliken belts. Now, with that said, I'm just going to be completely honest. I mean, my last purchase from Classic Shields, the plates on that belt are as good as any belt I've ever owned. They have really gotten good. of the Pakistan makers have really taken it to the next level.
So why did you get rid of that Hogan then? Was the art exactly the same, or was it the leather that was putting you off? Why'd you get rid of it?
I love taking pictures and sharing pictures, and I couldn't share it because it was a bootleg. And I ended up making a trade for a Dave Milliken belt to a collector who has a private collection, but he didn't care if I shared the belt I traded for was a ECW World title, beautiful belt. And so we made an even trade. I was able to show off that belt.
Okay, let's move forward in time a little bit. So I'm thinking this is around about the time when Belt Talk started?
Correct.
Or was this a little bit before?
A little bit before.
What came first? Was it Belt Talk or Flair for the Gold?
I believe there was Belt Marks, which was Dan ran it too. Now, of respect, I won't say I'll use his screen name, Dan McMahon. I won't say what his real name is because, unfortunately, he had to use a name like that because some people just get really crazy on this in this hobby. But anyhow, he had done, I believe, Belt Marks was his too, and then he turned it into from that comes Flair for the Gold, and then eventually there was Belt Talk. So, and then I think there was a couple others, but really it was Belt Talk and Flair for the Gold. Those were the main two, and Belt Talk was really the top one. That's the one that got the most action. That's where everybody was going. But Flair for the Gold was more people who were shunned or kind of blackballed in Belt Talk. They went to Flair for the Gold.
When I came into the hobby, Flair for the Gold was, I guess, at its end of its run because I think Teddy Sauer had just got his crumb rind. He got the crumb rind to make his big gold. Belt Talk was still around. It was either Belt Talk or Flair for the Gold, and Flair for the Gold was on the way out. There's been a lot of other ones that come in. I know that Main Event Belts, Gav Manel tried to start up his own one. Icon, Adam Gibbons, had his own one. But none ever seems to get as much traction as Belt Talk. Why is that?
I mean, you look at Dan on YouTube. I mean, he gets an insane amount of followers. He's well known. We've not always seen eye to eye, but he's honest up front. He's not going to sugarcoat it. He's probably the most well known belt mark in this hobby. Love him or hate him, it is what it is.
And I can second that as well too, because I've done some dealings with Dan. Well, not heaps, but some. He always says what he says. He always does what he says. I can't understand why the hate is. And that's why I was asking before, has that hate always been around in the hobby? Is it the hate of the success? Is it because he's got Belt Talk, because he runs that? Is it because he has good belts that people want? Is it a jealousy thing? Why so much hate for him?
There's some jealousy, I think. Also, too, I mean, he's not completely innocent. I mean, he is, sometimes, like I said, when somebody gets a brand new belt, the last thing I want to hear is, I like it, but, and, he's been guilty of doing that stuff to people and kind of rubs people the wrong way. But also, too, he's going to be honest with you. But sometimes honesty is not always the best thing. It's like if you don't have something nice to say, just don't say anything.
After Belt Talk, the Facebook groups, I can't believe it took so long for, well, I don't know if I can't believe it, because I can believe the success that you have had. The first Facebook group about belts was Brothers of the Belt. How did that come about?
I had kind of not really been seeing eye to eye with Dan. Like, I had nothing personally against Dan. I really don't. I respect him. Even when we have not seen eye to eye, I've always known I could contact him for a reason if need be.
Belt Talk only has one rule. What's that rule?
No boots.
Coming from the other Yahoo groups, was that a good rule? Was that a rule that people respected? Or was that a no-boot rule that you can talk about openly? What did you think about that rule?
I think it was a lot of respect Midwest. You know, Reggie and Dave were just so well respected in Belt Talk. And when you were, you know, doing boots, a Midwest boot, I'm telling you, I mean, up until just a few short years ago, you did not post Midwest boots. You just didn't do it. Even if you owned one, there was very few people you showed or told. Really, you didn't even show anybody. You might have told somebody you had a Midwest boot, but you didn't want to take a chance on a picture of you with a Midwest boot. Because these guys, they can pick apart a boot. You know, even some of the best boots, you know, I'm sure you can and I can. I can tell you if that's Midwest or if that's somebody else. So, yeah, you post a Midwest boot, you were taking a shot at Dave or Reggie and just was not accepted.
And that's the same sort of thing, I guess, that I asked before, because these boots weren't coming from Pakistan. They were coming from the States, weren't they?
Yes, it was all American.
And, because, I mean, up until recently, no one knew how the belts were made. They didn't know about acid etching, didn't know it was zinc plates, they didn't know it was gold plated, they didn't know it was like clip art and stuff like that.
Right.
How did these guys know how to put a bootleg together?
Well, they got into making custom belts. So, I mean, I know Ron Edwardson. I got to know him a few years ago, and he was just buying replica belts. And he just kept researching and built friendships, and he would learn a little bit of this. And I think Ron was already doing leather work, so he knew how that part of it worked. But he just didn't start making belts. I mean, it took him a few years, and I think, you know, Ron's another one, love him or hate him. You cannot deny the quality of his work. He's another perfectionist. But nobody just starts making belts. They, like I said, anybody who was doing American boots, they started doing custom boots, or not boots, custom belts. And then all of a sudden, they figured out how they're doing, you know, the artwork, the coral draw or corral draw or whatever it's called, which my wife can do that. She works for a uniform company, and that's the same way they design uniforms, badges, and all that. So my wife could probably design belts because, like I said, she makes her business, her dad owned. They made police badges. Not much difference in that if you think about it. So I think that's how some people just kind of had an idea, and it just built from that. And then once they started doing custom belts, they're like, oh, wait a minute, I could do a J-Mar belt. And then they thought, I could probably do a Midwest. And a lot of early boots, like my Hogan 84, beautiful, great etching, very clean, great plating, but it was, you know, almost the size of a big gold. The size, they just didn't know the sizes. So then, you know, people would know, like, if somebody came in a belt group like Belt Talk, and they're like, can anybody give me the size, the plate sizes of their belt? Where everybody knew right then what you were probably doing. You were trying to bootleg. And nobody would share that information. But if you got to know people behind the scenes, people would share that information, made friends with you. But just to come on those belt groups and ask that kind of question wasn't going to happen. People protected the hobby.
Do you remember when that started to change? You talked about, can you remember when someone started asking questions of how belts were made?
I can remember people asking that and just getting absolutely blitzed. Nobody would share information. Like, if you were new and showed up asking that, you would get hammered. But I can remember Elgin Moore. That's how a lot of guys got started, doing leather work. And then I kind of just progressed from doing leather work. And Elgin did decent leather. Then he got into the customs. And then I'm sure he was doing boots. I don't know. He never told me that. We were pretty good friends. They never told me that.
I'm just thinking, well, if I mention a name to you, you don't have to answer it or not. Adam Gibbons.
Okay.
Icon.
Me and Adam get along great. I
Was
think he's another straight shooter.
Was he the first guy to really start asking the questions or start asking the hard questions?
He was the first person who bucked back. Why won't you share this information? You know, he's a straight shooter. I've never had a problem with that. And we actually just talked, I guess, about a week or so ago. And what's funny is, like, I won't talk to Adam for a year or two. And then we'll just start talking like everything's normal. You know, I respect Adam. But he was probably the very first person to really bite back when people got nasty about it. This latest, well, it's not even late. I guess he designed it a couple of years ago. This hybrid Winged Eagle, Big Eagle belt. He was who designed it, and it's just exploded. I don't know if you've seen it.
Well, yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it looks great. But, you know, he's the first person who started saying, this is clip art. I respect it's clip art, but I still feel like Reggie created these designs. So even though he used clip art, he's who put them all together.
You were never the guy that always thought that if I find the original pieces and put them together, that's the same as someone that's got the original belt.
No, I mean, it is clip art, but Reggie's who put those beautiful designs together. Yeah, I firmly believe. Now, with that said, I own a bunch of Reggie Park boots, but yeah, I mean, it's Reggie's baby.
So you were on Belt Talk for a while. Tell me
Yep.
about your thoughts on Belt Talk.
I enjoyed it. I really felt like I was one of the boys. Felt like I was accepted there. I always enjoy. I mean, I'll probably post it on there every day. Usually, when I would wake up before I go to work, I'd check my emails and I'd check Belt Talk. I enjoyed it, but it did kind of get hostile there towards the end, and then that's when I found Flair for the Gold. And Flair for the Gold for me, because I was buying a lot of replica belts, just for me, I felt more accepted there because there was a lot more replica belt owners there. So I kind of really started posting on Flair for the Gold more than Belt Talk.
Flair for the Gold sort of petered out for a long period of time, and then there was Belt Talk. That was the only place you could go. There were sort of, I know Adam Gibbons, Icon, did his championship marks for a little bit, and there was Gab Manel, Main Event Belts. He did his World of Wrestling belts for a little bit as well too, but none of them really sustained for a long period of time. Why do you think people come back to Belt Talk?
Dane's he's without a doubt. Him and Super Dave are probably the two best well-known belt marks. And even if people don't like Dan, and he's got his hate group, but I think they still respect Dan. I think they still know that you can trust him. So I think that's why people continue to go back. Trust is very important in this hobby.
Well, particularly when you're spending a lot of money on belts or giving money to someone that you don't know just online. I guess your name is really worthwhile. And that's what comes onto the Facebook groups. Josh Hammer, his photos are on Dave Milligan's website. You were really the first. Brothers of the Belt was the first belt group on Facebook. How did that come about?
Well, I'll tell you what, I had figured out how to make a group for my other stuff I was doing. I was really starting to get to know people on Facebook, and it was people that I trusted, and I wanted to be able to share pictures of my boots. But I couldn't do that on Belt Talk. I couldn't do that on Flair for the Gold. So Brothers of the Belt wasn't really Brothers of the Belt. I can't remember what it was called. It might not even have a name. Maybe just Belt Picks or something like that. And it was just like a group, and it was for probably about a year or so. There was only about 20 or 30 of us, of trusted people that could share pictures of our bootlegs with. And then finally I could just remember getting upset one day, and I was like, you know what? I don't care if people see my boots. And I started adding other members. And then we probably, for about a year or so, might have had 100 or 200 members. And then it seemed like it just started snowballing. It would go 200 to 400. 400 to 800, 800 to 1600, and it just exploded. That's really how it come about. We just like, we're sharing what we have. We don't care. Belt talk's not the only option anymore. If you've been run off from those groups, here's maybe another place where you can have a second chance, where you're a little bit more accepted. So I think that's why it was so well received, is you could post without feeling judged.
Because if Belt Talk's got one rule, Brothers of the Belt doesn't have one rule, do they?
No, only rule we have is be nice. If you don't like it, just move along. If you have nothing nice to say, just move along. Now, with that said, if someone rips somebody off or is not honest with somebody about a belt they're selling, we're not going to hold back. We're going to expose them. That's kind of our rule, is we're not going to hold back. If you rip people off, we're going to expose you.
Because this is where I was trying to, I guess, coming back from the start where I started with, you've had health issues, like real life and death issues.
Yeah.
Belt collecting is a hobby. You might love your hobby.
Right.
Now you've got a place where people that love the hobby as much as you do, have as much respect about the hobby as you do, but then you've got these outsiders coming in as well too, people that are new to collecting belts, people that have not a great deal of money that want to collect belts, people that might want to profiteer off making belts or collecting belts.
Right.
Bootlegs now. How do bootlegs sit with you? A Reggie Parks bootleg. What if someone has a fake Reggie Parks WWF Winged Eagle and they say to you, this is my Reggie Parks Winged Eagle. I got it for $200. I want to sell it for $300. How does that sit with you?
It's definitely cheapened the hobby. I think a lot of people, they think if you buy a $200 belt, you're getting a $200 belt. Now, with that said, Classic Shields now, you can get a really nice belt from Classic Shields for $1,000, $1,200. I mean, to each their own. If they're happy with it, then I'm happy for them. But they probably don't know good quality. And that's okay. If they're happy with it, like I said, I'm happy for them. But I don't consider it the same. It's not the same. I mean, you're seeing now some guys are doing 4mm zinc for $175. I mean, it's probably horrible weather. They're probably not putting clear coat. So if you go to clean that belt, there's a good chance the gold plating is going to rub off. So you get what you pay for.
What about brass plates?
The only brass belt that I have ever liked, I got from Sammy Malik, Fight Night belts, and it was the WWE US, and I think it's because it had so much paint on it, you couldn't really see the brass, because 4mm brass is heavier than 4mm zinc. So I thought it was a pretty good belt. Now, me personally, I'm not a fan of brass. I prefer zinc. But, if that's what somebody likes, I respect that.
Alright, I'm a new guy in the hobby. I've got $200 to spend. Should I get a WWE replica or get a bootleg?
A year or two ago, I would say replica. Now, if you're new to it and you just kind of want to get your feet wet, take a chance on 2mm zinc. They're usually about $200, $225. Usually the etching is just as nice as 4mm zinc. Does not weigh as much. But you're going to get a decent leather strap. And like I said, the zinc, 2mm zinc etches well. 2mm brass, not so well. But if you're new to it, I would suggest you checking out 2mm zinc.
Floppy leather. What's that about? Do I want it extra floppy? Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, the nicest belt I've owned were not real floppy. The new belt I had from Dave Milliken was not floppy at all. Over time, it gets floppy. And a lot of what makes it floppy was the wrestlers getting sweat on it. That's what made it so floppy. So real floppy is not necessarily a good thing. I do kind of like it a little bit floppy, but I also want to be able to prop the belt
belts are expensive. I can get one for a couple of $100. Can I make a profit off that? Maybe I strike up a deal with a Pakistani maker. I can get the plates in, I can do the leather. I'm looking at a little bit of a profit. Am I going to make some money off this hobby?
I don't think you're going to get rich, but I think you can make something to help satisfy what you want to get out of the hobby. For instance, I mean, that's usually, since I got sick, I don't have the income I was making before. So I do sell belts sometimes to help fund the belts I want to get from the hobby. So I think you can satisfy what you want to get from the hobby. I don't think you're going to make rich off of it, though.
My Pakistan belt is as good or better than Dave Milliken's or Reggie Park's belts.
Right. My Classic Shield plates are just as good. I will say that. My orange leather is just as good as Midwest.
Is the art right?
My artwork on my Midwest, on my Reggie Park's Winged Eagle is just as good, yes.
All right, cool.
It actually, I think it came from an actual Reggie Park's belt, like in their possession.
What belts are in your current collection?
Oh, wow. I think I've got about 30 right now. I've tried to downsize, and I'm still looking to downsize more because obviously with my health the way it is, I'm not looking on going out anytime soon, but you never know, and I would hate for my wife to get stuck with 30 belts that she would have no clue what the value was. So I tried to downsize my collection, and honestly, over the next year or two, I would like to go to quality over quantity, sell some of these other belts, and replace them with a little bit better quality boots. It'll be boots. I don't see myself buying a $5,000 Midwest anymore.
How do you display your belts?
I've got some shelves down in my main cave, my basement, and I'll display them there.
Do you ever have a ritual of how you clean them?
Oh, yeah. When it's nice weather outside, I'll bring them out on the porch and do some cleaning. I love cleaning day. And that's usually when I take a bunch of new pictures.
And
I still enjoy my belts a lot.
How do you do it? Do you have a special cloth? Do you have...
Yeah, I got like the microfiber cloths I use. And I usually just use damp water. Occasionally I use ammonia-free Windex. But rarely do I even do that.
Do you do anything to the leather?
Yeah, just a damp cloth. Very damp.
Have you ever taken your belts to a live show?
I have. One time I took a replica belt, raw tag, to a wrestling show, and it was packed. It was a packed house, and it was so hot. And I don't know if it was the humidity, but the plates tarnished real bad after that show. So now I no longer take them to shows out of that fear. Like I said, I think it was the humidity in there that did it.
What's your favorite replica belt?
Favorite replica? Hands down, the UFC version 3. It is a monster of a belt with the stacked plates. That, WWF Shop UK, and the WWE Shop White Intercontinental. Those three are excellent. In my opinion, those are the three best replicas. That and the spinner belt, Reese Stones.
If the WWE put out replicas of the classic belts, like I'm talking the NWA TV, the NWA US, the old WWF Tag Team title, the old WWF Winged Eagle, the old WWF Intercontinental title, even if they had a different logo, if they were the same quality of those types of replicas, would you buy them over a bootleg?
Probably. They're an American business that the one time I've ever had trouble with the replica belts from Shop, I called them and they instantly took care of the problem. They emailed me a shipping label to ship it back to them. And yeah, I mean, I would support an American-based business, of course.
What's your favorite belt in your collection?
Right now, it's my Classic Shields Winged Eagle, hands down. It is a beautiful, well-done belt.
Is there any belt design that's grown on you over the years?
The old school Raw tag, when they first came out with it, I was not a fan. but it is one of my absolute favorites in my collection now. I got it from the team. He did an excellent job on it.
Is there a design that everyone loves but you secretly hate?
Dome globe. Yeah.
Everyone says
I've really grown to like it, but early on I was not a fan. I appreciate the history of it more than the look of it.
All right. What's the strangest thing that's happened to you in this hobby?
I don't know if it's strange, but probably the friendships I've made. I mean, some of my best friends now are from this hobby. I've got to know guys locally. You know, I thought I was the only guy that lived in my town that had this crazy obsession. But I met Kenny Ross, and I was like, he's just as crazy as I am. He comes to my house, we watch wrestling together. I would have never known him if it wasn't for belts. So that's kind of strange, I think. It's cool, but it's kind of strange.
Who are the best guys in the hobby?
Best guys in the hobby. Dave Miller. I mean, Ted Thompson, Cabral, Rodell, Alan Crank. Some really good guys. You know, a guy, he's kind of a polarizing figure, but Carmine Sabia. If you get to know the guy, he is a good person. Me and him have butted heads a few times. Like, we have gotten really pissed off at each other. But the thing with Carmine, give him 24 hours. He doesn't take anything personal. A day later, everything's fine. Ron Edwardson, he can be a real prick, but he can also be a really nice guy. Dan McMahon, he can be a real prick. They can also be really nice. A lot of guys know their personas. They don't know the real person. A lot of these guys, there's so many friends, and I hate to sell anyone short because there are so many good guys in this hobby. Mike Winokur, ton of good guys. Stephen Fuller, Stephen Hammer. And I've got to know a lot of these overseas belt makers. Sammy Malik, Omi, Awas. I mean, some really good guys. Mateen. Nice guys I consider friends now. And I hate to not name somebody and sell them short, so I'll stop.
What about the biggest jerks in the hobby? Who are the worst guys?
Worst guys. Really anyone that's stolen from people. A lot of people like to say Ron can be a jerk, but I've never known him stealing from anybody. Same with Dan. You don't have to like him, but, you know, as far as I know, he's never stolen from anybody. Really, the guys that steal. And that's probably my problem with Elgin. Elgin was always good to me, but he stole from people. That's really the unforgivable sin in this hobby, is if you steal from people. Those are the jerks in this hobby.
Have you ever been ripped off before?
I think that I've gotten belts that I felt that guys were not upfront and honest about, but I don't think anybody's ever outright ripped off me. Maybe the quality wasn't as honest. Maybe it had some flaws that they didn't say, but it's not worth me coming out and ruining the reputation.
What do you think about the current state of the hobby with all the Facebook groups?
Definitely cheapened it. It's gotten a lot cheaper. Good and bad.
And you say good and bad, is that good because it's opened up to more people, and bad because...
The Facebook groups have definitely opened it. There are so many people that collect belts. I mean, look at A&J belts. There's like 13,000 members. Probably more than that now. There's like 13,000 members in there. There's a lot of people in the belts that don't post. They just buy. The Facebook groups have definitely caused the hobby to explode in recent years. Made it more able for people to collect.
Have you held any real ring use belts before?
I have never owned one, but I've held some.
What are
when
they?
I met Dave Milliken.
What do they compare like to the replicas that Milliken produces?
Not mint. I mean, everyone I've ever held that was ring used, obviously they're scuffed up. That's kind of what I like about them, though. You know, because you know how they've gotten scuffed up. You know, the leather's kind of stretched looking and worn out. But that's, you know, like if I bought a ring used belt, I would leave it exactly like it was. Because that's years on those belts. That's history.
Well, if money was no object, what would be the one belt that you could own
I would like to have the ring belt that Bill Eddie Demolition Axe had for sale a while back. I would love to have that. I think it sold for about $10K back then. It's probably worth a lot more than that now.
The dual-plated WWF Tag Team one.
Yeah.
What do you think about the current designs of belts?
Not much of a fan at all. I like the IWGPs. I like the AEW. I like the AEW. Kind of has that classic feel to them. Not much of a fan of the new WWE belts. Any of them. Probably the nicest WWE belts they have are the women's tags, in my opinion.
Right here, Reggie Milliken, J-Mar, Wildcat, other. Who's your favourite designer and maker?
Easily those, yeah. Rico, I mean, the belts he's put out, the designs, the UFCs, and even the new UFC has really grown on me. At first, I didn't like it because, it's replacing a classic, but it's grown on me a lot over the last year or so. I mean, I've grown to like it, but I think, like I said, it replaced a classic. It's like replacing the Stanley Cup in hockey. Just people wouldn't care much for that at first. Or the World Series trophy. It was, that UFC belt was so iconic. I think it's what people's problem with it is.
So, how do people follow you on Facebook or Instagram?
On Facebook, we're Brothers of the Belt. And on Instagram and the internet, BOTB.life.
And I've seen some cool shirts of you guys as well too. How do you get one of those shirts? Do I have to get onto Facebook or Instagram? How do I get one of them?
You can go to ProWrestlingTees.com, search Beltomania, and the Brothers of the Belt shirt is in the Beltomania store. You can get hoodies or T-shirts, different styles of T-shirts.
Josh Hammer, thanks for joining us on the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast.
Take care, my brother.
You're watching the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. For your official Groovy G Belt Podcast merchandise, check out www.groovygshop.com.
Now, let's take a sneak peek at what's coming your way on the next Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast.
On the next episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast.
On the next episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast, we've got a real classic. We're going to have a close-up look at a Reggie Parks-made NWA United States Championship. Until then, make sure you don't miss a thing by subscribing to this YouTube channel, and you can join in the conversation on Twitter at Groovy G Belt Show or on Facebook. Until then, take care. It's bye for now.